On the 4th of December 1872, the crew of a British brigantine called the Dei Gratia sights a ship that will not answer. She is out in the open Atlantic, roughly midway between the Azores and the coast of Portugal. Her sails are set, though some hang torn, and she yaws off her course as if no hand is on the wheel. The Dei Gratia's captain, David Morehouse, watches her for 2 hours, no flag of distress, no figure at the rail. He sends his first mate, Oliver Devoe, across in a small boat to board her. Devoe climbs onto a deck that is wet but sound. Below, in the cabin, the log lies open. A child's clothing is folded and dry. There is food in the stores and water in the casks. The ship is the Mary Celeste, out of New York, bound for Genoa with a cargo of alcohol. And she is empty. 10 people are simply gone. A captain, his wife, their small daughter, and 7 crew. And the single boat that could have carried them is gone with them. The Dei Gratia and the Mary Celeste were not strangers. Their captains, Morehouse and Briggs, had dined together in New York only days before both ships sailed for the Mediterranean. That fact would later be turned against Morehouse by a suspicious court, as though a shared supper were evidence of a plot. It was not. For 150 years, people have filled that silence with invention. Warm meals left steaming on the table. None of it is in the record. What follows is what the record holds, and why the likeliest answer is a decision made in fear. She began her life under another name. Built at Spencer's Island on the Nova Scotia shore and registered in 1861, she was first called the Amazon, a modest brigantine of about 99 feet, 2 masts, wooden hull. She was not a lucky ship. Her first captain died within days of taking command. In the years that followed, she ran aground, caught fire, and collided with another vessel in the English Channel. By the early 1870s, she had passed to American owners, been rebuilt and lengthened to a little over 100 feet, given a second deck, and renamed. She was now the Mary Celeste, registered in New York, worth far more after a refit that had cost some $10,000. Her master for this voyage was Benjamin Spooner Briggs, a shipmaster's son from Massachusetts, born in 1835. He was, by every account, careful and religious, a man who did not take risks with a ship or the people on her. He held a part share in the Mary Celeste herself. The cargo was his own venture, not a stranger's freight. He did not sail alone. His wife, Sarah Elizabeth, came with him, as she had before. So did their daughter, Sophia Matilda, 2 years old that autumn. They left an older son at home with relatives to keep at his schooling. A family at sea, then, a small child among the charts and the folded linen on a passage her parents had made many times. The Mary Celeste cleared New York Harbor on the morning of the 5th of November, 1872. In her hold sat 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, industrial spirit bound for the merchants of Genoa, not for drinking. Her crew of 7 were chosen with care. Albert Richardson, the first mate, was an experienced seaman Briggs trusted. The second mate, Andrew Gilling, was about 25, born in New York of Danish descent. Edward Head served as steward and cook. The 4 able seamen were Germans from the Frisian Islands, the brothers Volkert and Bos Lorenzen, along with Arian Martins and Gottlieb Godschall. Briggs wrote home warmly of them and thought them a peaceable, capable crew. The lawyers at Gibraltar would later try to make something else of them. The practice of the merchant service was strict on one point. A ship's master kept a running log, and a mate kept a slate log at his post, noting position, weather, and the state of the vessel through every watch. Aboard the Mary Celeste, that discipline held to the end. Her last log entry was made at 8 in the morning on the 25th of November, and a mate's slate carried later, rougher notes still. The North Atlantic in November is heavy weather, and the ship met it. That last entry placed her off Santa Maria, the southeastern island of the Azores. It is the last certain moment of the 10 of them alive. From that position to the place where the Dei Gratia found her drifting was nearly 400 nautical miles, a stretch of sea the ship crossed, it seems, with no one aboard to sail her. This is the heart of it, and the record is exact, because almost everything the public believes about this deck is wrong. The boat was gone. The Mary Celeste carried a yawl, a small ship's boat, lashed above the main hatch, and it was missing. It was not smashed and not hanging in its falls. It was gone in a way that suggests it was launched on purpose, with people climbing down into it. There was water below, about 3.5 feet of it in the hold. Standing practice gave a crew the means to know exactly how bad that was. A ship of this kind carried 2 hand pumps and a sounding rod, a weighted line dropped down a fixed pipe to the bilge, was meant to be run at regular intervals so the master always knew the depth of water against a known mark. The rule of good seamanship was to sound the well, read the rod, and set the pumps going before water could gain. 3.5 feet sounds grave, and it would have alarmed a crew, but for a ship of her size, it was not sinking deep. The Dei Gratia's men pumped her out and sailed her to port without much trouble. Aboard the Mary Celeste, that routine had plainly been interrupted mid-task. One of the 2 pumps had been taken apart and left on deck. The sounding rod lay abandoned nearby, as though someone had been checking that depth in a hurry and set it down. The fore-hatch cover had been lifted off and lay upside down on the deck beside its opening. A crew worried about vapor in the hold might well have opened it to let the fumes clear. DeVoe, who spent hours aboard, would later testify that the ship was thoroughly wet inside but in no danger of sinking, and that everything about her spoke of a hasty departure. The compass was knocked from its housing, its glass broken. The captain's chronometer, his sextant, and the ship's papers and register were missing, the very things a careful master takes with him when he leaves a ship, expecting to be found and identified. The cargo was almost wholly intact. Of those 1,701 barrels, 9 were found empty. The stores of food and fresh water were ample, and the sails, though some were split and some furled, were still largely bent and set. Now, what was not there? There was no meal on the table, warm or cold. There was no half-drunk cup of tea, no pipe still smoking, no clock stopped at a fatal minute. Those images were invented later by storytellers and repeated so often they hardened into memory. The real cabin was tidy, dry in its upper reaches, and abandoned. The evidence on that deck describes people who left in haste and took a boat. The Dei Gratia brought the Mary Celeste into Gibraltar, and there the salvage hearings opened before the Vice Admiralty Court in mid-December. To claim salvage, Morehouse and his men had to prove the ship had been genuinely derelict when they found her. That should have been straightforward. It was not. The Attorney General of Gibraltar, Frederick Solly Flood, took charge of the inquiry and quickly convinced himself that a crime had been committed. He seized on small things. A surveyor reported cuts on each side of the bow. Stains that looked like they might be blood were noted on a sword found in the cabin and here and there about the ship. From these threads, Solly Flood wove theories that the crew had broken into the alcohol, murdered the Briggs family and fled, or that Morehouse and his own men had done away with everyone aboard the Mary Celeste to claim her. The evidence did not hold. Scientific analysis of the stains on the sword and elsewhere found that they were not blood. The marks on the bow were consistent with ordinary weather and wear. There was no sign of struggle, nothing was stolen but a navigator's own instruments, and no motive survived scrutiny. The German seamen he had all but accused were, on the record, exactly what Briggs had called them, ordinary sailors. In the end, the court found no proof of foul play. The salvage award, granted in the spring of 1873, came to about £1,700, roughly a fifth of the combined value of ship and cargo. It was a modest sum for a clean prize, and its very smallness is telling. The court plainly still harboured a suspicion it could not prove. Sollyflood had a murder with no body, no weapon, and no crime. If the court could not solve it, the public would. And the man who did the most to bury the facts was not a criminal, but a young doctor with a gift for stories. In January of 1884, a short story appeared, published without a name, in the Cornhill magazine. It was called J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, and its author was Arthur Conan Doyle, still years away from Sherlock Holmes. Doyle took the bare fact of an abandoned ship and made it thrilling. He renamed the vessel the Mary Celeste, with an extra E, and that misspelling is now the name most people think was real. He invented characters, a lurid plot, and a ship found in almost perfect order, boats and all still aboard. It was fiction and never claimed otherwise, but it was so vivid that readers took it for truth, and a Boston newspaper reprinted it the next year as fact. Doyle himself was astonished. From then on, the story grew of its own accord, each retelling adding a warmer meal, a stranger detail, until the invented Mary Celeste had all but replaced the real Mary Celeste in the public mind. The details people are surest about are, almost without exception, the ones that were made up. So, what likely happened? We cannot know with certainty, and honest inquiry says so plainly. But the evidence points, more than anywhere else, toward one sequence, and it is a quiet one. Consider the cargo. Denatured alcohol in a wooden hold, worked hard by cold Atlantic seas. 9 barrels were found empty. Those 9, made of a more porous red oak, may well have leaked their spirit as vapor into the hold. To Briggs, opening a hatch to a hold reeking of alcohol fumes, with the real fear of fire or explosion at the front of any careful captain's mind, the danger would have seemed immediate. Add to that the 3.5 feet of water and a pump found disassembled. It is very possible he could not get a true sounding and believed his ship was flooding faster than she was. There is a physical reason to believe this. Alcohol expands and gives off vapor as it warms, and a hold that had been bitterly cold in the North Atlantic gales, then eased by a change of weather, could have released a sudden reek of fumes through the ship. 9 of the barrels, the porous ones, were dry, their contents already gone to vapor. A modern recreation of the conditions found that such a build-up could produce a harmless but violent-seeming flash of pressure, enough to blow a hatch cover off without leaving a mark of fire. To a captain, that would look exactly like the beginning of a disaster. Here, the standing convention of the sea matters. A master did not abandon a sound hull lightly. The expectation was to fight for the ship first, to sound the well, work the pumps, and clear any danger before ordering anyone over the side, and to take to the boats only when the vessel was judged past saving. If a boat was launched at all, good practice was to keep it made fast to the ship by a line until the crew were sure they had to cast off. That convention explains the scene better than any crime does. Picture the decision then. A sober master, his wife and small daughter aboard, faced with what he reads as a ship about to burn or founder. He orders everyone into the yawl, and this is the crucial, likeliest detail. He keeps the small boat tethered to the Mary Celeste by a line, meaning to stay close and reboard once the danger passed. Then the weather, or a parted rope, does the rest. The tow line snaps. The ship, still under some sail, draws away faster than a small open boat can follow, and the 10 of them, within sight of safety, are left in the ocean with no way back. It is a theory, not a verdict, but it fits the missing boat, the abandoned sounding rod, the taken instruments, and the open sea between them and land. No pirates figure in it, and no mutiny. What it describes is a careful man's precaution that went wrong in the worst way. The Mary Celeste herself sailed on. No owner kept her long, and she passed through hand after hand with a bad name trailing her. In 1884, she came to a Captain Gilman Parker, who loaded her with a near-worthless cargo dressed up on the manifest as valuable goods, insured her heavily, and in January of 1885, deliberately drove her onto a coral reef off the coast of Haiti to collect the money. The fraud was found out. Parker escaped prison on a deadlocked jury, but he died in poverty within the year, and 2 of the men who had schemed with him came to ruin. So ended the ship, in something small and mean. 10 people were lost. Benjamin Briggs, the careful captain who took his family with him and thought the ship safe. His wife, Sarah Elizabeth. Their daughter, Sophia Matilda, 2 years old, Albert Richardson and Andrew Gilling, the mates, Edward Head, the steward and cook, and the 4 Frisian sailors, Volkert and Bos Lorenzen, Arian Martins and Gottlieb Gaudschal, a long way from home. They were not swept away by anything uncanny. They climbed down into a small boat because they believed it was the safe thing to do, and the sea did not give them the chance to climb back.